Hello and welcome to Unwind Sessions, where right after my shift, I give the highlights of my workday and answer any questions you might have right after that have been posted from the day before. My name is Juan. I am a English Spanish medical video remote interpreter with over 4 years of experience. Today is Thursday, April 15, 2021, and today I took around 35 calls. It was mostly video sessions, but there was a lot of time that I had to hold and wait for the doctor, so it wasn't really that tough. There were not very many many noteworthy things that happened today. However, I am going to talk about a couple of things that happened today. One of those was a new word that I didn't know, and it was stasis. The provider actually used the word venous stasis, and the Spanish translation for this is estasis venosa. What a venous stasis is a pooling of blood in the veins, and a venous stasis ulcer is a wound on the skin caused by the pooled blood. These ulcers occur most often on the legs. So that was a new word for me today. That was the only new word that I had today. Like I told you, it was a pretty easy, pretty chill day. Not very, the calls weren't that difficult. It was pretty good, a lot of hold time, so it was an easy day. One thing that happened is that a lady and a provider kept on cutting me off, but it didn't happen during the whole session. It only happened probably the provider said something, and then the patient said something, and then the provider said something, and then the patient said something, and that was about it. Maybe it was just like four things that were said, and as soon as I was about to say something, the other party would cut me off, and as soon as I would interpret what was said, the other party would cut me off. What I do whenever this happens is that what I think is that what the last person said, what I was going to interpret, but what was cut off, I think that what the last person said, the person that is listening, the listener actually understood it, or it's not important to them. So I don't even bother trying to like force the interpretation so that the other person like just forcing it onto them, like, oh, the provider said this, and I don't care what you're saying. I have to tell you what I have to say, what the provider said, and I don't do that because you don't know if the person understood, or you don't know if the person is just being rude. So what I opt in doing is that I actually, let's say the provider said something, and then the patient cuts me off. So this automatically makes me think, like I've already stated, the person understood or doesn't care what the provider said. So I am going to listen to what the person is saying, and then once it's done, I will go back to the provider and just let them know. Sometime, well, in this case, they didn't even let me speak. But sometimes when they cut me off, like at the middle, and they start speaking, I just let the provider know, the gentleman cut me off at the end, and this is what, or cut me off at whatever part, and this is what he said, or the lady. But yeah, so sometimes the provider doesn't say anything. Sometimes the provider or the patient will actually be like, could you please let the provider or the patient know, could you please let the other party know what I actually said? And then you say, of course, I will gladly let them know what you said if you can repeat it. And this is very important. I personally asked them to repeat it because I'm not going to remember what was said after I give a whole interpretation of something else. And even if you think you do remember what was said, I highly suggest that you ask for them to repeat it, just to give a more precise interpretation. And there is an exception though. If I personally feel that the information that was provided by either party, it doesn't matter. If I feel like it is very, very important and must be heard, then I let the provider or the other party know. I tell them, I'm sorry, this is the interpreter speaking, but I really do believe that what the other person said is very important, and I will let you know what they said. Because sometimes like the provider gives some really important detailed information about a patient's condition, and then the patient doesn't care and just says something randomly, well, not randomly, but something that they're interested in, and they totally miss that. And if I feel like it's very important, then I will let the person know, I'm sorry, what the doctor said is very important. Like, discúlpeme, lo que dijo el doctor es muy importante y creo que lo debo escuchar, así que le voy a mencionar lo que usted dijo antes de decírselo a lo que usted dijo al doctor, which would be like, I really think what the provider said is very important, and I am going to let you know what the provider said before I actually give the interpretation that you of what you gave me. And it could be the other way. I think the patient is very important what he said, and that is just a personal note. That is going to be up to you if you actually do it or not. And that was pretty much it for today. Like I told you, it was a pretty easy day. And I'm just going to stick with those two things for today. And I am going to answer one of our viewers' questions. It's LeoBG95. Thank you for your question. And his question was, "Hi, I'm in training for being a Spanish interpreter, and the hardest parts have been the note taking and the memory retention. What methods did you use at the beginning to practice these skills?" And honestly, I at the beginning I was panicking, I had anxiety, and I had the burden in my back to actually pass the test to get the job because I quit my other job because I really wanted to become an interpreter. So I don't think you should be taking advice from that man, honestly. But now that I have more experience, I can actually give you a better insight than what I actually did at the beginning. Because at the beginning, I was looking for information like the practice sessions that we have, and I couldn't find one. I only found one, and I was just very anxious. I was panicking, and I was doing all kinds of things that I really shouldn't have done. But that was my situation back then. So that's what I did. I was downloading. I would not download. I would watch just conversations on YouTube, and I would just uh, try to interpret them. And I believe there was even a practice, not a session, but like a practice speech from I don't remember what it was, but it was a practice speech that you could interpret. I believe it should probably be online still. Um, but yeah, I was just trying to interpret everything that I would get my hands on, and I was practicing the whole thing, practicing the the note taking and the interpreting all at the same time. Like if it was a real session, I would just press play to any random video, and then I would just try to interpret what they said. I tried it with English and Spanish, and that was very good, and that will help. But I have more tips that I can give you now that I have much more experience. And one of the things that I'm going to let you know is that you shouldn't think about memory retention and note taking in isolation. That is going to be a big mistake because, as we've already explained, if you haven't seen our video, A Note for Beginners, uh, I suggest that you really take a look at that video because it's going to let you know all of the things that are actually going on that you're doing what you're while you're interpreting, because it's so many things that are going on, not just note taking and memory retention, but you're actually have to listen to the speaker. You have to just pick out the right words to write down in your notes, and you have to translate it, and you have to read back your notes, and there's just many, many, many things that are going on. And I believe that it's a mistake if you actually just focus on like note taking, like how do I improve my note taking, and just work that in isolation, or how do I improve my memory retention and just work that in isolation. In our practice, uh, in our course, before actually becoming interpreters on our interpreter course, they showed us some exercises for memory retention, and they were just like saying a word and then you reading it back, like practicing with a friend. Your friend says a word and then you say it back, and then your friend says two words and then you say the two words back, and your friend will just keep on increasing the the words until you can no longer read them back. And I believe that's good, but it's missing a key element in interpretation, because what you're reading back is not actually the same thing in English. You're actually interpreting it and reading it back in Spanish. So that's why I'm telling you, like, don't look at those things in isolation and practice interpreting. And while you practice interpreting, you are going to improve all of the skills or all of the key skills needed to become an interpreter. After saying this, I'm going to go into some points that are going to be very important for memory retention. One of the things that actually helped me the most in memory retention was actually something that I saw from a TED Talk. And I believe it was a girl. Don't quote me on this because my memory is a little fuzzy. It was a while back. But I believe it was a girl that was reciting pi to I don't know how many digits. And when they actually asked her how did she actually do it, she said that she made a story in her mind, and like for example the first number, like she would imagine like she was walking through the woods, and then I don't know the numbers of pi, and I can't, honestly I don't know why I can't think of it right off the top of my head. 4.15 something, I don't remember. But anyways, like she would say, I went into the woods and I saw four trees, and I walked a little more, and there was one uh, fox, and I don't know. And she would just continue her story until the last digit of pi that she could recite. And it was a story, her actually imagining that she was walking through the woods and actually seeing all of these things that actually made her remember pi. And that actually worked for me the most, and I hope it works for you as well. But everything that I'm telling you here is just my personal experience. It might work for you. Maybe it won't. So just take what works and leave what doesn't. But visualization is going to be a key element in this, because if you can actually picture in your head what the other person is saying, then it'll be easier to recall, because you're going to, as you see the words on your notes, you're going to be able to remember the story. Uh, One thing that is very difficult is with mental health patients. Sometimes they don't follow like linear story that actually makes sense. Like they jump from one thing to another, and I've noticed that those sessions are very, 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 very hard to interpret, because visualization doesn't work, because it doesn't follow like a sequence like you would expect. And of course, I mean, they're mental health patients, and it's just some illnesses. I wouldn't be able to tell you which ones, but certain illnesses that this is actually hard. So visualization is going to be key in memory retention and actually being able to recall long utterances. And if you can practice this, that is going to be the best. Another thing for memory retention is actually focus. You're going to have to be 100% focused and listening to the speaker and actually making that story in your mind, actually seeing that story in your mind, I should say, as you're actually writing down your notes. And um, you really need to focus just on what the speaker is saying and nothing else. Like, for example, if anything just catches your attention or something, you're going to remember like probably 3 or 4 words that just happened, and you're not gonna get them back. I tell you because that has happened to me before. Uh, like I could be thinking about something like a problem that I've had, and for some reason it just pops into my head while I'm interpreting, and I have to ask the person for a repetition because when that thought just came into my head, it just makes you lose focus and it'll make you forget what the person was saying. So you need laser-like focus, and so visualization or focus are like two key aspects that I would say are key to memory retention, and also practice. I can't stress this enough. If I take a look at the notes when I started the course, I was almost trying to practically write every single word down. And if I look at my notes now, like I know what key elements that I actually should write down, but that actually comes from practice. So memory retention is actually going to improve if you actually practice your interpretation. If you actually practice like real scenarios that are going to be like like in your job, in your work area. Like for example, it doesn't make sense to do medical scenarios if you're going to be actually working for something else like customer service, you know, it will help. It will help because you're interpreting. But I mean, I think it'll give you more vocabulary that you probably will not need. So actually, just make sure that you're interpreting things that are related or kind of related, and practice interpreting and not just memory retention. So that was it for memory retention. I'm going to move on to note taking. For note taking, I'm going to recommend that you begin note taking with a pencil or pen as you actually practice, because this way you are going to be able to go back to your notes and actually see what you actually wrote down. And one key element of one thing that really helped me with improving my note taking was to actually look at sentences and just extract the minimum amount of words for a sentence to make sense. For example, this sentence that I'm looking at right now says, look at sentences and extract the minimum words of the sentence to make sense. For example, if I had to interpret that, I would probably put down look, sentences, extract, min, words, sentence, sense. So you see, you don't have to write everything. If you say look, sentences, extract, min, word, sentence, sense. I believe with that is going to give you pretty much the information that you need to actually remember that sentence. So actually go ahead and look at sentences and just get into the habit of extracting just the necessary information for the sentence to have the same meaning. And just really practice a lot. Uh, eh, Go ahead and practice your scenarios and look for more scenarios online. I'm sure there are plenty of more material available, and we hope to have some more material in the future. But go ahead and practice your scenarios. If you have already practiced your scenarios, go ahead and take a look at your notes, like practice a scenario, and then look at the notes that you actually wrote down, and actually go back to the scenario and look at what you wrote down in the notes and what is actually being said, and see if maybe you wrote too many notes. Maybe see if you can write, if you can use less notes to actually keep the meaning and help you remember. This is a little hard because this is going to be unique for every person. What works for me might not work for you, and what works for another person might, and might not work for me. So this is just going to be a lot of trial and error, and just practice, practice, practice. I mean, practice is going to get you there, and there's no substitute for practice. Um, so actually, like I said, go ahead and do our practice videos. And once you're already done with the practice videos, take the piece of paper that you worked on and go back, play the video, and look at the notes that you wrote down. And you're going to see that maybe you wrote a little bit too much, maybe you wrote a little bit too little. And that's how you're going to gauge what you are going to write down. But again, I mean, nothing is going to beat practice, and practice interpreting. Don't practice improving your notes. Don't practice memory retention. Don't practice listening. Practice everything at the same time, because that's actually what you are required to do when you work. So, just to recap, visualization is number one, focus and practice. And for note taking, using pencil and pen to practice. Once you master those, you can move on to other tools. And just looking at the sentences and looking at the notes from or practice material, so you actually can gauge if you're actually taking good notes, or if you can reduce your notes even more, or maybe if you need to write a little bit more. And I believe that will get you on your way. But practice, 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 practice. I tell you practice because I actually noticed that when, like, probably a month after actually working, that was a lot of practice. And I noticed how my note taking would get shorter, how I would actually listen more to the people, and how I would actually be able to recall long utterances. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope I answered your question. And if I didn't, you can always ask more in depth question of what you need. So that will be pretty much it for me today. Remember that I'll be here every Monday through Friday after work. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked the video and have not done so for more content. And don't forget to share. Happy interpreting. Goodbye.